The night in New York was biting cold, cutting through to the bones. The city lights shone brightly, reflecting the opulence of a lavish party I had just left. With my tailored jacket snug against me, I walked the streets, feeling the contrast between the sophistication of the event and the reality unfolding around me. It was a party filled with laughter, toasts, and empty conversations about business and status, but as the icy air wrapped around me, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that even the finest champagne couldn't fill. Then my eyes fell on a figure sitting on a corner of the sidewalk, almost invisible amidst the frenzy of the city. It was a woman, wrapped in tattered rags that seemed to offer no warmth. Her hair, a tangled and dirty mass, framed a face marked by time and hardship. She sat there, head down, holding a small sign asking for help. The scene contrasted so sharply with the glamour of the party I had just attended that I felt compelled to approach her. "Hello," I said, hesitant but determined. "Would you like a hot coffee?" She lifted her eyes, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to pause. There was an intensity in her gaze, a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Hot coffee?" she repeated, as if weighing whether it was a trap or a genuine offer. "That's not something I expected to hear tonight. I know it's not much, but the cold is unbearable." "I'm coming back from a party, and I thought you might need this," I replied, trying to mask the strangeness I felt in addressing a stranger. "A party, huh?" she replied, a wry smile touching her lips. "And you think I'm just a homeless woman?" "No, that's not it," I sensed I had failed to express myself. "I just wanted to help." She looked at me for a moment that felt like an eternity, evaluating me, perhaps weighing the intentions behind the offer. Finally, she nodded, and a small spark of gratitude lit up her eyes. "All right. A coffee would be nice." I went to a nearby cafe, and while I waited, I couldn't help but think about how distant that woman was from the world I knew. When I returned, I handed her the steaming cup. "Here, it's all I have to offer," I said, sitting down beside her on the cold ground. "Thank you," she murmured, bringing the cup to her lips and taking a sip. The warmth seemed to revive her. "You really don't have to do this. Most people just walk by. Why are you here?" I asked, my curiosity driving me to want to know more of her story. "How did you end up on the streets?" She sighed, her gaze distant, as if the words were hard to find. "I was an artist," she began, her voice trembling but strong. "A promising artist, at least. I had dreams, exhibitions, a future. But life has a strange way of bringing us down." "What happened?" I couldn't help but ask. There was something about her presence that fascinated me, a strength that contrasted with the fragility of her situation. "A series of tragedies," she said, sadness clear in every word. "My mother died, my partner left me, all of that made me lose hope. I couldn't paint anymore, and life simply took me to the streets." As she spoke, I could feel the pain in her voice. It was as if each word sliced a piece from her soul. I didn't know what to say. The world I inhabited, rich and successful, seemed so distant from her reality. "Do you still paint?" I asked hesitantly. "There's no space for that here," she replied, bitterness palpable in her voice. "Art requires an open heart, and I don't know if mine can be that way anymore." "You should," I said without thinking. "Art is a form of expression, and you seem to have a powerful story to tell." She looked at me, a glimmer of surprise and interest in her eyes. "Do you care about what I have to say?" "Of course," I affirmed. "I'm an investor, but that doesn't define me. I'm human too." "And what does that mean?" she asked, a skeptical expression on her face. "It means that behind wealth and success, there's a search for something deeper," I replied, feeling the conversation deepen in a way I hadn't expected. "I have everything, but often I feel empty." "You're not the first to feel that," she said, with a hint of wisdom in her voice. "But what do you do with that emptiness? What do you really want?" I hesitated. I had never thought much about it. What did I really want? The answer slipped away from me like a dream fading upon waking. I don't know, I confessed. Maybe I just want connection. She watched me for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of my words. Connection is a rare thing, especially in a city like this, she said, looking around. Many people feel alone, even amid crowds. And you? I asked, curious. Do you feel alone? Her expression changed, her gaze deepening. Sometimes, loneliness is a choice, she replied. I chose to be here, away from the world I knew. But that doesn't mean I don't miss something I'll never have again. The silence between us grew, and I realized there was something more than just a simple exchange of words. There was an emerging connection, an invisible thread binding us. I didn't know where this would lead us, but I felt that this encounter was just the beginning of something much bigger. Would you like to tell me more about your art? I asked, trying to open the door for her to express herself. She hesitated, but the spark of interest seemed to flicker in her eyes again. Maybe I can show you something, she said, and a shy smile appeared on her face. But only if you promise you won't walk away like everyone else. I promise, I assured her, my heart racing with anticipation. The night continued to unfold, and the cold grew more intense. But in that moment, all that mattered was the connection beginning to form between two worlds so different. I was sitting on a polished wooden bench near a busy corner of New York, with the icy wind blowing against my face, while I watched Clara. The conversation we started that night transformed into something deeper and more meaningful than I could have imagined. The glow of the streetlights illuminated her face, revealing features marked by life on the streets, but also a beauty I couldn't ignore. Clara listened to me intently, and for some inexplicable reason, I felt the need to open up to her. You know, I began, breaking the silence, being a millionaire isn't everything it's cracked up to be. People think that having money solves all problems, but in reality, it just brings more pressure. I looked at her, searching for a sign that she understood what I was saying. I can imagine, Clara replied, with a slight smile. Appearances can be deceiving, can't they? You can have all the luxuries in the world and still feel completely empty inside. Exactly, I said, leaning back against the bench. Sometimes, I feel like I'm trapped in a cage of gold. The expectations are overwhelming. Everyone expects me to always be successful, to be an example, but no one asks how I really feel. She tilted her head, as if processing my words. And how do you feel, Ethan? Lonely, I confessed, the word coming out heavier than I expected. I have friends, of course, but they're more like acquaintances. No one really cares about me. Life has become a series of meetings and commitments, and I hardly recognize myself anymore. Clara smiled empathetically. I understand. Sometimes, we just need someone to listen to us, to see beyond the surface. You're an artist, Clara, I said, admiring her passion. How did you end up here? The question slipped out, and I realized I was genuinely interested in her story, as if it could illuminate the shadows of my own life. She hesitated, looking down, as if memories were holding her captive. There was a time when I had hope. I had an art exhibition that attracted a lot of attention. A young millionaire helped me get a gallery. I was so excited, dreaming of the future, until everything fell apart. What happened? I asked, curious but respecting her space. I got swept away by fame. The young man, he was charming, but also unpredictable. When the money started to run out and my art stopped selling, he disappeared. I lost everything. And at some point, I lost myself too. That's terrible, I murmured, feeling the weight of her words. You still have talent, Clara. Art doesn't vanish, even if circumstances change. Thank you, she replied, looking into my eyes. But what I really lost was my confidence. And now, here I am, living on the streets. Silence settled between us as I tried to comprehend the depth of her pain. She was so much more than just a homeless woman. The woman before me had dreams, hopes, and a past that shaped her. Life is strange, isn't it? I said, trying to break the tension. One day you're on top, and the next, you're struggling for every penny. Yes, Clara agreed, with a distant look. It's as if life is rolling dice, and somehow, I lost. You haven't lost everything, I said, feeling an urge to encourage her. Art is inside you. It always will be. She smiled softly. Thank you, Ethan. It's rare to find someone who cares. Most people only see what's on the surface. I want to understand more about you, I insisted. Tell me more about your art. What did you use to create? I loved to paint, Clara began, her eyes lighting up. My canvases were filled with vibrant colors, raw emotions. I wanted people to feel something when they looked at them. But over time, the color faded, and all that was left was emptiness. That's deeper than I expected, I said, admiring her sincerity. You can still create. Life can be a blank canvas, and you can choose the colors again. She looked at me, as if assessing my genuine desire to help her. And you, Ethan? What do you really want from your life? What makes your heart race? I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. I'm not sure. I've always followed what others expected of me. What my family wanted, what the investors wanted. But now, talking to you, I feel like I need to search for something more authentic. Maybe it's time for you to paint your own canvas too, Clara suggested, her voice soft and encouraging. You have the chance to rewrite your story. Those words echoed in my mind. I was so caught up in a cycle of expectations that I had forgotten what truly mattered. You're wise, you know. I said, with a genuine smile. I learned from pain, she replied, with a look that mixed sadness and strength. But this doesn't have to be the end. It can be a new beginning. The conversation flowed, and time seemed to stand still as we connected on a level I had never experienced before. I wondered if, in some way, Clara and I were two sides of the same coin, she, struggling against loss and disillusionment, and I, battling pressure and loneliness. Clara, I said hesitantly, there's something you haven't told me, isn't there? Some secret or pain you're holding back. She hesitated again, as if weighing her words. It's complicated, she began, looking at the night sky. Sometimes, the pain is so deep that it's hard to find the words. You can trust me, I encouraged her. I'm here to listen. I met a young millionaire at an art event. He was charismatic, gave me hope, and I believed he could change my life. But he disappeared when things got tough. That's sad, I said, sensing there was more to the story. You were hurt by that, weren't you? Yes, she replied, her voice almost a whisper. But it's not just that. What I didn't tell you is that this young man was, well, he was your father. Her words hung in the air like thunder on a clear sky. My heart raced, and I didn't know what to say. The connection between us was deepening, revealing ties I could never have imagined. What do you mean? I asked, trying to process the revelation. I didn't want to tell you like this, Clara replied, her eyes filled with sadness. But the truth is he led me to believe I was special, and then he left. And you are what he became. I just can't handle it. The silence that followed was deafening. The night was cold, but an unfamiliar warmth began to form between us, pulling our intertwined lives in unexpected directions. I looked at Clara, realizing that even amidst the chaos, there was a chance to find understanding and healing. I woke to the first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains of my room. The day promised to be sunny, but inside me, a storm of thoughts was brewing. Clara. The image of her, with her piercing gaze and that way of telling stories, wouldn't leave my mind. What had happened the night before was more than just a simple meeting, there was something profound, something that challenged me to look beyond appearances. I got up, dressed quickly, and decided that I couldn't let the morning pass without finding Clara again. I grabbed a few things that might help her: brushes, paints, and a sketchbook that had been sitting on a dusty shelf. As I left my apartment, I took a deep breath, as if I wanted to absorb the energy of the day, but my heart pulsed with uncertainty. What would I say to her? How would she react? I walked through the streets of New York, the vibrant city around me, but everything felt distant. People rushed past me, immersed in their own lives. I felt like an intruder among them, lost in a world that, until then, had seemed so familiar. As I approached the spot where I had met her the night before, a sense of anxiety began to take hold of me. When I arrived, I looked around but didn't see Clara. A knot formed in my stomach. Had she already left? The thought of possibly losing the chance to get to know her better was agonizing. But then, in a corner, I spotted her. Clara was sitting on a crate, a blanket draped around her, drawing something on a piece of paper. Her hair, tousled by the wind, danced softly, and her expression was focused. "Hi, Clara," I called out as I approached. She lifted her head, and a shy smile spread across her face. "Ethan. You came back." "Of course I came back. I brought something for you." I extended the materials I had brought, trying to hide the growing expectation within me. The sparkle in her eyes was immediate. "You brought this for me? But, why would you do that?" "Because you inspired me. I can't explain it, but I feel like there's something special about you. And I'd love to see what you can create." The nervousness in my voice was palpable, but it was the truth. She took the materials, examining them carefully. "That's very generous of you, but I don't know if I can anymore. Life on the streets, it robs you of creativity." "Maybe. But what if we try together? What do you think about doing something right now?" I was determined to encourage her. Clara hesitated for a moment, but then a spark of determination shone in her eyes. "Okay. Let's try." She looked down at the ground, as if weighing her words. "But don't get me wrong, Ethan. I'm not a typical artist. Life has taught me to be cautious. I understand. And I promise I'm not here to pressure you. I just want you to feel comfortable." The air around us seemed to vibrate with a new energy, a mutual expectation. We began working together on an impromptu project. I held the palette of paints while Clara started sketching forms and ideas. The chemistry between us was palpable. The way she mixed colors, the way her eyes sparkled as she talked about art, it all captivated me. As minutes turned into hours, the outside world faded away, and we were just two creators, merging our visions. "You know, I used to have a gallery," Clara said as her lines began to take shape on the paper. "I had an exhibition before everything fell apart. People talked about me. I was someone, you know. I understand. Sometimes, success comes at a very high price," I replied, remembering the pressures I faced in my own corporate world. She looked at me, surprised. "You speak as if you know what you're talking about." "I do. The pressure to maintain a standard, to always live up to expectations, it's exhausting. Sometimes, I feel like I'm just following a script that was imposed on me." "Is that why you were drawn to me? Because I'm the opposite of what you have?" Clara asked, a mix of curiosity and skepticism in her voice. "No. I'm drawn to you because you're real. You're not afraid to show your wounds, and that's rare." My sincerity seemed to take her by surprise. She hesitated, looking at the paper as if the answers were there. "What if I can't rise back up? What if I sink even further?" "I won't let that happen. And know that if you need help, I'll always be here. You don't have to face this alone." The weight of my words hung between us, creating an even deeper connection. Clara smiled, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. "Do you really believe I can still be an artist? That I can create again?" "I not only believe it, but I want to see it happen." Let's work together. You've shown me your passion for art, and I want to help reignite that. The desire to see her shine gave me courage. Minutes flew by in a whirlwind of colors and laughter. Clara began to open up more, sharing stories of her life, the people she had met, and the struggles she had faced. I listened, fascinated. There was a beauty in her vulnerability, a strength that radiated from her, even in adversity. You know, there are moments when I feel like all of this is a dream. That at some point I'll wake up and it will all disappear, she said, her voice now softer. I feel that way too, sometimes. But maybe this dream is what we need to find our truth. I was starting to realize that the connection we had was more than mere coincidence. Truth is a complicated word, isn't it? Clara replied, laughing a little. Sometimes, the truth is painful. Yes, but it's also liberating. And I feel like we're on the right path. The empathy we shared was a bridge that united us, making the barriers between our lives dissolve. As the sun began to set, the sky transformed into a palette of oranges and pinks. The scene was perfect for this new phase of our friendship. I looked at Clara, absorbing every detail of her expression. That moment was magical, and I wished it would never end. Ethan, she began, hesitantly. Are you really willing to help me? Even with everything that this might mean for you? I am. Life has brought us here for a reason. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to find out together with you. My heart was open, and I wanted her to feel that. Thank you, Clara whispered, and in her eyes was a mix of hope and fear. I knew there was still much to explore, but in that moment, everything felt possible. And I was determined to help her find her way back to the light. The morning sun began to break, filtering through the gaps between the skyscrapers of New York. The chill of the previous night still lingered in the air, but I was determined not to let that affect me. With every step I took towards the place where Clara usually sat, my heart raced faster. There was something about her that captivated me, something that made me want to understand more about her life and her struggles. When I found her, she was sitting in her usual spot, wrapped in an old blanket that seemed more like armor against the world. Her eyes, a deep shade of green, sparkled with an intensity that defied the harshness of life on the streets. I approached her, carrying a bag full of art supplies I had bought the night before. I wanted her to know that, even amidst all her pain, there was still room for creativity and beauty. Hi, Clara, I said, trying to convey the confidence I was far from feeling. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and distrust. Ethan, you don't have to do this. I'm not an artist. I'm just a woman living on the streets. You are an artist, Clara. And I want you to rediscover that, I replied, trying to convince her. Art doesn't fade away that easily. It's inside you. She hesitated, but upon seeing the sincerity in my eyes, a faint smile formed on her lips. All right then. What did you bring? My fingers danced through the bag, pulling out tubes of paint and brushes while Clara watched, curiosity beginning to shine in her eyes. I brought some acrylic paints, a sketchbook, and, well, a little bit of fun, I said, winking at her. Fun? I hope that doesn't involve a competition for who paints better, she said, her soft laughter echoing like music in my ears. No, nothing like that. We're just going to let creativity flow, I said as we began to set up the materials on a relatively clean patch of ground. As we started working, the conversation flowed naturally. Clara spoke about her former life, her aspirations to be a recognized artist, and how, in one moment, everything fell apart. I listened intently, absorbing each word, every nuance of emotion in her voice. It was an incredible exhibition, she recounted, brushing a vibrant blue over the blank surface. I had a piece that meant the world to me. But after the tragedy, I just stopped creating. It was as if the palette of colors I had inside me had run dry. You should have a chance to show your art again someday, Clara. The world needs voices like yours, I said, wishing my words could heal the wound she carried. She paused for a moment, gazing up at the blue sky above us. "Do you really believe that?" she asked, her voice slightly trembling. "I believe it. Art is a form of expression, and you have so much to say," I replied, feeling the urgency to encourage her. "If I could just forget everything, maybe I could," she murmured, her voice heavy with a sadness that made me want to protect her. "Forgetting isn't the way, Clara. What's happened is part of you, but it doesn't have to define who you are now," I said, determined to help her find her strength again. As we continued working, time seemed to fly by. Our laughter and conversations blended with the distant sounds of the city, creating a magical atmosphere between us. Each brushstroke seemed to bring Clara back to life, and I felt privileged to witness it. After a few hours, Clara stepped back to admire what she had created. It was a mix of vibrant colors and abstract shapes that reflected not only her pain but also her hope. "Ethan, this is different from what I used to make. It's as if I'm rediscovering something I thought I had lost forever," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You never lost it, Clara. You were just keeping it hidden. And now, I'm here to help you find it," I said, feeling a wave of emotion as I saw her transformation. But just like the sunlight that began to hide behind the clouds, reality soon imposed itself. My phone vibrated in my pocket, interrupting that magical moment. I looked at the screen and saw my assistant's name flashing. It was a call I couldn't ignore. "I'm sorry, Clara. I need to take this," I said, standing up, reluctant to leave that instant. "It's okay. I understand," she replied, but her voice carried a hint of disappointment that made me hesitate. I answered the call, but the conversation quickly turned into a series of urgent questions about contracts and scheduled meetings. Each word pulled me further away from the reality I wanted to explore with Clara. When I hung up, I realized she was looking at the ground, as if she was closing off again. "Clara, I don't want you to think this changes what we're building here," I said, trying to reconnect. "But it does, Ethan. You belong to a world I don't understand, a world where people matter and opinions hold weight." "I'm just a homeless woman," she countered, her voice heavy with silent despair. "You're so much more than that. You're an artist, and that's what matters. Don't let society define who you are," I said, wishing my words could penetrate her insecurities. She looked at me, visible conflict in her gaze. "What if I can't go back to being who I was? What if art isn't enough?" "You don't need to go back to who you were. Just be yourself, Clara. And art, well, art will always be enough as long as you put your heart into it," I replied, hoping my words could spark a glimmer of hope. "Ethan, I don't know. This is all so new and scary," she said, the vulnerability in her voice almost breaking my heart. "I'll be here, day after day, until you feel ready." "I don't intend to leave you behind," I assured her, holding her hand for a moment, feeling the cold texture of her skin. She smiled, but the apprehension still lingered in her eyes. I knew I had to go, but the thought of leaving her was agonizing. "You promised you'd come back, Ethan. I don't want you to abandon me like everyone else," she said, the sadness in her voice cutting like a knife. "I promise. I'll be back. Just trust me," I said, taking a step back, feeling the distance between us grow. "I'll try," Clara replied, but her voice was laden with hesitation. With one last look, I walked away, the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. I knew the corporate world awaited me, but more than that, I knew Clara was waiting for me. The connection between us was just beginning to take shape, and I was determined not to let her slip away. The atmosphere felt heavy, and the lights of New York City seemed brighter than ever. I found myself in a true dilemma, caught between my business and the growing friendship with Clara. It was as if an invisible magnet was pulling me in her direction, while the weight of corporate commitments piled up on my shoulders. The memory of our last conversation still echoed in my mind, the way she looked at me, full of doubts and fears. And I knew I needed time to process it all. I walked to the cafe where we used to meet, the aroma of fresh coffee enveloping me, but that wasn't what I wanted. What I truly desired was to see Clara, to hear her voice, and to feel the connection that grew stronger with each passing day. As soon as I entered, my eyes scanned the place, but I didn't find her. My heart tightened. What would I do without her? What would I say if I saw her again? The last time I was with Clara, she seemed so distant. "Ethan, I need some time," her words were still fresh in my memory. I had tried to understand, but there was something deeper behind her gaze. Something that told me her life wasn't just about being on the streets but about a past that haunted her. I decided I couldn't leave her like this, so I left the cafe and headed toward the park where we used to spend hours talking. The atmosphere felt different, charged with a silent expectation. As I walked, the cold breeze hit my face, but I didn't feel cold. I was determined to find her. When I arrived at the park, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty of the moment was a stark contrast to the harsh reality Clara faced every day. "Clara." I called, but the only response was the echo of my own voice. Despair began to consume me. I couldn't let her slip away. Then, I saw a familiar silhouette in a corner of the park. My heart raced. It was Clara, sitting on a bench, staring intently at a piece of paper. As I approached, I realized she was drawing, her hands moving quickly, capturing something only she could see. The beauty of what she was creating left me speechless. "Hi, Ethan," she said, without looking up. Her voice was soft, but there was an undertone of sadness. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I came looking for you," I replied, the urgency in my voice reflecting what I felt inside. I was worried. She finally lifted her eyes and met my gaze. "Worried? For me?" "You don't need to worry, Ethan. I can take care of myself." I moved closer and sat beside her. "I know you can, but that doesn't mean I won't worry. Clara, I feel like we're drifting apart, and I don't want that to happen." She sighed and looked at her drawing. "Sometimes, it's better to distance ourselves. I don't want you to feel trapped by me. Your life is different, and I'm just a homeless person." "No, you're not just that," I protested, taking her hand. "You're an artist, an incredible woman who has shown me a world I've never known. And I want to be part of your life, no matter how different our realities are." Clara pulled her hand away, as if my touch haunted her. "Ethan, you don't understand. I have a past I can't forget. What if I get attached to you and something happens? What if I end up hurting you? You can't live in fear of what might happen. We all have our demons, but that doesn't stop us from seeking happiness. Look at me. I'm a millionaire, but deep down, I feel so lonely. You're the only person I feel I can be myself with." She hesitated, her eyes shining with a mix of emotion and pain. "You don't know what it's like to live without hope. For me, it's hard to believe that someone like you really cares. What if I open up and you decide it's not worth it?" "I'm not like that, Clara. I'm not a man who simply abandons people. Your story has touched me in ways I can't explain. You make me want to be a better person." The silence that followed was heavy, as if the unspoken words floated between us. Clara looked down, and I could see she was battling a tide of emotions. "Ethan, I don't know if I can. I'm scared. Scared to believe that I can have something good in my life again." "Then let's do this together. Let's face our fears and build something new. I want to help you rediscover your art, your passion." "You don't have to do this alone," I said, holding her gaze. Time seemed to stand still as she contemplated. Finally, Clara took a deep breath and murmured, "I don't know if I'm ready, but maybe I can try." A smile formed on my face. "That's all I ask. Just try." In the following days, Clara began to open up little by little. She showed me some of her drawings, each one filled with emotion and story. Sometimes, I saw her lost in her thoughts, and I didn't know how to reach her. But there was a spark in her eyes that gave me hope. Then, one day, she invited me to an art exhibition at a local gallery. "My works will be there, Ethan. I would like you to see them." That invitation surprised me and made my heart race. "You're exhibiting your works? That's amazing. I'll be there, of course." But when I arrived at the gallery, the atmosphere felt different. The place was filled with elegantly dressed people, and I felt out of place amid such opulence. As I walked through the artworks, I noticed some of them were by Clara, and the beauty and depth of her creations left me speechless. "Ethan." Clara's voice called, and I turned to find her. She was dressed stunningly, but there was a glimmer in her eyes that told me she was nervous. "You came." "Of course. Your works are incredible. You're a talented artist, Clara. I didn't know you had this kind of recognition." She smiled shyly, but then a man approached. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded a confidence that made me feel insecure. "Clara, darling. I heard you're back in the art world. How wonderful. What do you want, Thomas?" Clara replied, her tone shifting to a more defensive one. "I'm just here to congratulate you. Your works are impressive, but do you really think you can sustain yourself here?" He looked at me, assessing me. "And who's this?" "Ethan, this is Thomas, an old acquaintance," Clara replied, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Nice to meet you, Thomas," I greeted, trying to stay calm. "I'm a friend of Clara." "A friend, huh? I hope you take good care of her. The world can be cruel, and Clara has already seen her share of pain." The way Thomas said that, with a sarcastic smile, unsettled me. I could feel the tension in the air. "I'm here to support her," I replied, trying not to let his words affect me. "Clara is an incredible artist, and I believe in her talent." "Talent isn't enough, my friend. What do you really know about her?" Thomas provoked, and Clara shrank back, as if trying to shield herself. "I know she's so much more than you can imagine," she replied, unable to hold back her defense. "She has strength and passion, and that's what matters." Thomas gave a dismissive smile, but Clara intervened. "Enough, Thomas. I don't need your validation or your disdain. I'm here for myself, not for you." The tension flowed between us, and I realized Clara was standing up. She was stronger than I had thought. The determined look on her face reflected the internal struggle she was fighting. "Come on, Ethan. I want to show you something." As we walked away from Thomas, a wave of relief washed over me. Clara seemed lighter, as if she had freed herself from a burden. "Thank you for being by my side," she said, gratitude palpable in her voice. "I'll always be here, Clara." "No matter what happens," I replied, feeling that despite everything, we were drawing closer to each other. We were beginning to build something new, and I couldn't be more excited about what was to come. When I arrived at the place where we used to meet, my heart raced faster than ever. The night was shrouded in a dense fog, and the city lights flickered like distant stars, but none of that mattered. I needed to find Clara. The revelation I had just discovered consumed me. Clara wasn't just a homeless person, she was the daughter of the man who, in some way, had shaped my life. The connection I felt for her now became more complex and, at the same time, more intense. As soon as I spotted Clara, a wave of concern spread through my body. She was sitting on a small bench, her gaze lost in the void, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world were on them. As I approached, I realized something was wrong. Her expression, usually full of life and humor, was now dark and distant. "Clara!" I called, trying to hide the urgency in my voice. "Clara, are you okay?" She slowly lifted her head, and our eyes met. What I saw in her gaze left me unsettled. There was pain, sadness, and deep disillusionment. "Ethan," she whispered, "I don't know if I can." "No, don't say that," I interrupted, anxious. "I discovered something. Something that changes everything." "And what could change everything?" she asked, distrust evident in her tone. "What could you possibly have found out that's more devastating than what I've already lived through?" I felt the weight of the truth in my hands. It wasn't a revelation I was sure I should share. But at the same time, I couldn't keep it to myself. "Clara, the man who let you down, he's my father." She fell silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then, her features changed, and anger began to bubble in her gaze. "How can you say that?" She stood up abruptly, defiant. "You know nothing about me or what happened." "I do know," I exclaimed, frustration building inside me. "I know he left you on the streets, that you lost everything. And I know he was the man who helped me build my fortune. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because it wasn't my story to tell," Clara responded, her tone sharp. "You don't understand, Ethan. My past is a labyrinth of pain and betrayal, and you can't just come in and out as if it's all simple." "I'm not trying to simplify anything," I shouted, emotions spilling over. I just want to understand. I want to know why you're here, why you hide from your identity." She took a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words. "Because I'm not who I used to be, Ethan. That promising artist was destroyed. My father, the man you admire, didn't just leave me, he abandoned me. And I can't just go back and say, hello, as if nothing happened. But you are more than that." I interrupted, trying to help her see what I saw. "You're talented, Clara. You have a gift. You can start over. And you think I could be accepted back into the world you live in?" She stepped closer, challenging. "Do you think your father would accept me back? That the people around you wouldn't look at me as if I were a burden? A reminder of his failure?" Silence settled between us, heavy as a storm cloud about to burst. I wanted to reach out to her, to hold her and tell her that everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. The fear of losing the connection we had paralyzed me. "Clara, please," I pleaded, my voice low. "I'm not my father. I don't want you to live like this, hiding and hurting. You deserve more. We deserve more." She hesitated for a moment, and I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. "And what do you suggest? That I simply show up in your life and everything gets resolved? You don't understand the depth of what I'm feeling. You don't know what it's like to be left behind." "I do. I know what it's like to feel alone, lost," I declared, my voice now softer. "I've felt that way since my father became a businessman. I've never felt good enough for him, Clara. And now, discovering that you're part of my past, I feel like I'm losing a chance to understand who I am." She looked at me, and for a brief moment, anger gave way to vulnerability. "Ethan, it's not just about you. I have a life that I've built here, even if it's hard. I can't just leave it all behind." "Then why can't we build something new together?" I said, trying to ignite a spark of possibility. "You can help me see the world you live in, and I can help you find your way back. It doesn't have to be a return to who you were, but a new chance." She fell silent, and I watched her emotions intertwine, like colors on a painter's palette. "Do you really believe we can do this?" she asked, hope beginning to shine in her voice. "Yes, Clara," I replied, stepping closer to her. I believe that together we can rewrite our stories. You don't have to face this alone." Finally, Clara seemed to relax, and the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. "And if I don't know how," her voice trembled, but there was a new vulnerability there. "Then we'll figure it out together," I affirmed, extending my hand. "I'll be by your side, no matter what happens." She looked at my outstretched hand, hesitating for a moment, and then, with a hesitant motion, took my hand. The touch was gentle, yet charged with emotion. It was as if, in that moment, the barriers that separated us began to crumble. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, a slight smile beginning to appear on her face. "Let's start painting our new story," I replied, with a smile that matched hers. "But before anything, we need to truly get to know each other. I want to hear every part of your life, every pain, every dream you still hold on to." "I think that might take some time," she said, a glimmer of hope now visible in her eyes. "Time is something we have plenty of," I said, pulling her closer. "And I promise I'll be here, ready to listen." And so, wrapped in a new hope, we began to build what could be the first step in rewriting our stories, transforming the pain that united us into a new narrative of love and understanding.